Okay, well, it is after 6, and I will call the meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville to order. Today is Tuesday, May 23rd, 2003 at 6 p.m. And as I said, and we are in the council chambers. Candace will start with roll call.
Kathy Kopp. Here. Jason Arts.
Here.
Lynn Parrott. Here. Todd Casper.
Here.
Ken Killian. Excused. Barbara Doss.
Here. Okay, the first item on our agenda is tonight a presentation by the Chancellor. So we welcome newly named, how's that? Right up there to the podium.
Well, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thrilled to be here. As Barb said, I'm honored to have been appointed the Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. This is my first attendance at your meeting as the official Chancellor. As you all know, I was the interim Chancellor for about 11 months and then got the news that I'd been named permanent Chancellor. So I'm honored to be serving in that role. And I'm excited about the work we can do together. And so what we wanted to come talk to you about tonight is some strategic planning that we're going to be doing. The university's strategic plan comes to an end in 2024. So in the spring of 2024, it will come to an end. And so we have this year, this summer, and then this year to start planning to plan the plan, I think is what we call it. We joke about that. And for some of you, you may know John Dunning, who came to Platteville from my previous institution. He was somebody that I recruited from my previous institution, came last March, I believe. Okay, so he's been here over a year now, but what he was that person that I brought to Platteville to help us understand our data and to help us strategically plan. So he's somebody that I call the data Lorax, meaning we have plenty of data, we have lots of data, but he's that person that can cull that data and tell us how to make decisions around it. And so he's been really important. He's changed the data culture at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. And I've put him in charge of our strategic planning process. So I wanted to bring him here tonight to introduce him to you and to also ask you how you'd like to be engaged in the process, right? So he's going to take you through just a little bit of that. And then we'd like to know how you'd like to be engaged, because as I've said to many of you before, we are partners with our communities, we're partners with our region, and we want to act in concert because that's the way we will thrive together. So without further ado and not taking up too much of your time, I'm going to step away and introduce you to John Dunning.
Thank you, Chancellor. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to meet most of you and see some of you again and to join you this evening. So as Chancellor mentioned, we're going to be this summer planning to plan the plan, right? Strategic planning in higher education takes a while, and part of that is because we do a lot of stakeholder engagement and data gathering. And Chancellor's right, we have a ton of data as higher education institutions, but in my chair, I think we always need more. So we'll get more data together, right? So I want to go through that process with you a little bit, just to sort of explain how we'll be doing our work. And we do that work in 4 phases. So the first phase is one where we as the University of Platteville really look internally. So this will be really focused on engaging with our current students and with our faculty staff, doing a lot of self-analysis. Sort of this is the introspective part of strategic planning, right? What are we really good at? What do we think we're really good at as an institution? Where do we need to do some work? What are our opportunities? What are the threats? SWOT analysis, those kinds of things. We'll do surveys, we'll do listening sessions, all kinds of good work in that regard. But the second phase, and where I'd really like to plant some seeds with you folks in terms of questions that we'd love you to sort of just think about for a month or two and get back to us as the summer wanes, is really an external process that's very similar. We're going to reach out to all of our stakeholders. We're going to do surveys. We're going to really reach out and talk to folks and say, talk to us about the role that the University of Platteville has in your organizations, in the region, in the city, in the county, in your K-12 communities, and what does that mean to you? What's working well? What is maybe not working so well? What do you see in your organizations over the next 6 years, because this will be a 6-year plan? What do you see in your organizations as challenges or opportunities that are coming up that you would really like to look at your four-year regional comprehensive institution and say, we'd love to partner with you on resolving this. And where are the areas where we can work together? So that will be phase two. Depending on the timing, we may sort of do phase one and phase two at the same time, but we'll figure that out over the summer. Phase three is we're going to gather up all of that information, and we will have really a treasure trove of data at that point. And we're really going to distill that down and start looking at what are our goals as an institution for the next 6 years. And that's the tangible stuff that we can measure. And we will be very, what we call in higher ed, assessment driven and data informed in that process, right? We're gonna set goals, we're gonna set priorities, and we're gonna measure our progress along that over a 6-year period, looking at those goals every year and seeing if we're making progress or not. But we're also gonna look at the softer things that make an organization what it is. What are we as the University of Nebraska Platteville? University of Nebraska Platteville, University of Wisconsin Platteville. There isn't a Platteville, Nebraska. Well, there is a Platteville, Nebraska, but it doesn't have a university, so we're safe.
Okay. You know.
Old habits die hard, right? But what are we as the University of Wisconsin Platteville? And more broadly speaking, what are we as the region of Southwest Wisconsin, as the community of Platteville, and what are the synergies around those things that we can all contribute to that? So we'll distill that out. And then we will write a beautiful white glossy paper that we will distribute out to the Board of Regents and you all and all of our stakeholders. And that's a document that we collectively use to hold us accountable to what we say we're going to do and who we say we are. And we're really looking forward to that process. As you might guess, we'll do a mid-plan realignment as the plan goes forward. It turns out our last strategic plan was minted in 2019, and it was a 5-year plan. And I don't know how many of you remember what late 2019, early 2020 was like, but there was something that sort of changed how everybody operates. And I don't recall what that was, but there was something, right? And so we'll have mechanisms built into the plan for those kinds of adjustments. And that's just a reality of life and strategic planning these days. So we'll have that in place. We will have the Board of Regents in town in April of 24. That is less than a year from now. And we're going to see if we can have this thing ready for at least presentation to the board by then. That will be an aggressive timeline, but we're going to do our best to see what we can do. So what I would ask of you, and what Chancellor and I, and Paul as well, Paul is on our strategic planning steering committee with me. What we would ask of you is think about, as Chancellor said, how would you like to be engaged? Who are the communities of interest within the community of Platteville that are particularly bonded to the university, right? And that we really need to reach out to. What's the engagement between city departments and the University of Platteville? And how do we represent those interests, and what's the best way for us to gather that information? And again, we're not in a rush. We are planning to plan the plan, but we will not start until we have faculty and students in earnest, faculty and students back in the fall. But by the end of the summer, we want to have all of our ducks in a row and be ready to move forward, because once that fall season hits, we'll be moving forward quickly on the process. So please be taking that into consideration. We really want your input in this process and your engagement, not only in the creation of the plan, but in the execution of the plan as well. We want to be your partners in what the next 6 years look like. And so this is a great opportunity for us to sort of shape what that partnership looks like and align our efforts at the university and the city efforts together in where those common areas of interest are, so that we can move forward collectively. So at this point, I'd welcome to entertain any questions or comments from the floor or from the gallery.
Questions or comments for either the Chancellor or John?
Did you get a copy of the previous plan?
The question was, will we get a copy of the previous plan? And the previous plan is available on the UW-Platteville website. If you go to uwplatt.edu and just search strategic plan, it is right there, and you can absolutely pull it down. But I think Paul can probably arrange to have some copies sent to you all.
So when I meet with community members on Wednesday mornings at Badger Brothers, And I've had people come in and say that they wanted to find opportunities to partner with the university. The community is always trying to find ways to do that. If someone comes and says, we want to do that, do you just get the plan and send it to you? How would you want us to move forward on it? We'll communicate that with you.
I think we probably want to figure out a way to consolidate those requests and bring them forward, right?
Right.
And Paul and I can talk about maybe what a good liaison role would be there, but we absolutely want to be aware of those opportunities for partnership. For now, in preparation, if we can sort of keep notes on those so that we kind of get an inventory of where that desire for partnership is, then that will inform the strategic planning process in particular. But we don't need for the strategic plan to become operational. We don't need to say, everybody hang tight until summer 24 before we do anything, right? So let's bring those to Paul and we'll look at opportunities to partner, but we'll keep an inventory of those as well. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions?
I just would like to thank you for being here and even asking us for input and to strengthen that partnership that we have. It means a lot.
Thank you, Kathy. And this is, I've said to people, strategic plan is an opportunity to be a unifying exercise, if nothing else. Now, we don't plan on this plan to sit on the shelf. That's, we're going to revisit it on a regular basis. There will be a mid-cycle review of it. But, this is a unifying exercise for us, and that includes everyone in that. So we're hopeful in that. As John said, if you don't know, we are hosting the Board of Regents meeting next April. So that's going to be an exciting time here in the city and at the university as well. So we're hoping to have something to share with them at that time. There's always glitches in calendars, but that's going to be our goal anyway. Thank you everyone for having us. We appreciate it.
And I would just echo Kathy in saying that for a long time, I've said the way we move forward is moving together.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a very welcome invitation. And I'm sure that we'll have participation not only from council members and staff, but we'll also help to engage some of our local citizens and maybe even regional citizens. So moving together forward
Absolutely.
gets us farther faster.
Farther, faster. Absolutely. Ken?
Yes, if I have the right plan in mind, what struck me the most was that Pioneer Tower was to be torn down.
Well, that is a capital plan. That's like a 10-year facilities capital plan that I don't know if that's going to come into play with a strategic plan. That's kind of a separate thing that we do. But one of the things that John is really good at is taking all of our plans. So there's different plans across the university. There's an academic affairs plan. I think the athletic department has a strategic plan. The system has a strategic plan. And possibly our capital projects plan comes into play. We're trying to unify all of them and consider them and see how they roll into one campus strategic plan.
Since I was located, my office was in the 8th floor of Pioneer Tower, I'm slightly concerned about the plan. I'm just wondering where.
That's not necessarily something that we're planning on doing in the near future. Typically those facility plans are like a 10-year, maybe we can do this kind of plan. But when it comes to buildings and tearing them down, there's a lot that has to go into that before that would happen. So there's no immediate plans to do that. You're welcome.
Anybody else? Anybody from staff want to make a comment?
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. John, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chancellor. Okay, we'll move on then to the consideration of our consent agenda. We have all of these items can be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. If you want separate discussion, please let me know. We have the council minutes from April 20th and from May 9th. We have payment of bills, appointments to boards and commissions. Tonight I have an appointment to the Parks, Recreation and Forestry Committee, a name that we would know, and that is Debbie Sigworth, probably a name that Paul would know too. And appointments, the Tourism Committee appointments expire the 1st of July. Everybody that is on the committee is eligible to continue to serve, so I would then appoint those people Terry Malliot from Country Inn and Suites, Michael Breitner from the university, Deb Rice and Deb Jenny, and then who's the council rep? And then Jason is the council rep. I don't have to, I've already appointed you, but there are four. So I have those appointments tonight. There were a series of licenses in your packet. 1 and 2 year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol. And then we have a run walk permit for the St. Mary's Church Parade on Sunday, June 11th at 10 a.m. And the route appears to be from St. Augustine's to St. Mary's. And we're assuming, and I see Doug shaking his head, so our police department is very aware that this is going on. So, the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda. And I want to thank the president here for giving us the list of appointments, because I always wanted to know who was being appointed without finding out at the moment the name was brought.
Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, citizens' comments, observations, and petitions. I don't see anybody in the audience that might have anything to say. How about, councilmen?
This is the part I thank them. So I just want to take a moment and just be excited. The kids, first of all, I want to say congratulations. They will probably graduate before we come back to a council meeting. So those who are moving on from 8th grade on to high school, woo-hoo, and those who are moving on from high school into college, we're really excited about you. So the council is excited about you guys. I wanted to congratulate the team, the track and field athletes who qualified for sectionals, for the sectional meet through their performance at last night's regional meet in Prairie du Chien. Each of the individuals and relay teams will be represented at Platteville High School in McFarland on from Platteville, represent Platteville, will be in McFarland Thursday night. So you guys, like, for the sectionals. So they're moving forward. I'm so proud of them. I have a whole list of names, but it's a lot of names. You guys know who you are, because it's a lot of names. We're just proud. We want you guys to move on, always represent Platteville with dignity, honor, and always win. Run.
Okay. Other,
Actually, I have one thing. I'd just like to let everyone know that a former Platteville native, and UW Platteville grad, Mike Myers, for those of you that know him, he and his wife Sue lived here for a long time. They have since moved back to Iowa, but tomorrow, Mike has garnered a seat on the honor flight to Washington, D.C. Right, to welcome him back. He played an instrumental part in hosting the Vietnam Moving Wall in 2009 and took the lead on establishing our memorial in City Park. So it's a big thing.
okay, and I would like to thank Nicola, Clint, and Kathy, and former alder Eileen Nichols for spending the day today with me in Madison, talking about the city and actually not only our city, but other cities, villages, towns, counties, in terms of our need for an increase in our shared revenue. So special thanks to them, and special thanks to Colette for making arrangements. We were able to stop in 5 different offices and see folks, and that's really a testament to Colette being able to get all those parts to move together. So thanks to all of you. The other thing I would announce before we have another meeting of this council, our Platteville Inclusive Playground will be opening. So the grand opening date is set for Saturday, June the 3rd. The ribbon cutting for that event is scheduled for 10 in the morning. And we certainly would encourage as many people as possible to turn out for this really transformational event in terms of playgrounds in our community. And I reach out to city staff and say thanks for all the extra time and all the extra efforts you've put into assuring that we're on schedule to get this thing opened now in June. So thank you all. All right, we'll move on now to the reports. There were some in your, the reports in your packet were the museum board, and we currently don't have a rep from the council on the museum board and the community safe routes committee. Jason, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay, then we'll move into the action portion of our agenda. The first thing is ordinance, the ordinance pertaining to parking for the senior center. Howard.
Yes, thank you. The senior center is currently in OE Gray Early Learning Center. That building will be demolished for a new fire facility. The senior center will be relocated downstairs below us here. We've been looking at alternatives to provide parking for seniors. Staff have determined that there are approximately 9 to 12 vehicles parked at the senior center on a regular basis. We've identified 12 spaces close to City Hall that could be allocated for the purpose. Now, the employees would have access to the same parking as other City Hall employees. They would not be using the senior center designated spaces. After further discussion with senior center staff, we did recommend modifying the recommendations from last meeting a little bit, changing the loading zone to a daily senior center parking stall, and then changing the times for the daily parking to begin at 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. Staff recommends allocating 4 stalls on Mineral Street north of City Hall, 3 stalls in the diagonal parking south of the police department, 2 stalls on 4th Street next to City Hall, and the 2 westernmost stalls in the reserve parking lot in Lot 2 as daily senior parking, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., open to the public at all other times. The stall immediately east of the 2 in Lot 2 would be recommended senior center parking only 24/7 for a senior center van. Director Maurer has been in contact with representatives of Brightspeed to explore the use of stalls in the Brightspeed parking lot for city staff, so that would open up parking near City Hall with no impact to other businesses. We're still working through that. I don't know if she has any updates on that, but we expect action soon on that.
We're hoping. We haven't heard back yet from Brightspeed on that.
But we have an attached a proposed ordinance and map in case you wish to review those.
Okay, any questions on the ordinance to amend parking to provide for senior center parking adjacent to City Hall?
Howard, will there be the senior designated stamp, like how we have or disabled parking type thing? Will there be more of those so that people will know? Will there be an addition of because right now we only have 2 out here, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Handicap parking stalls, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there were not any additional handicapped parking stalls that were designated in this. We have, as you know, the 2 that are on the north side of City Hall, and then there's one in front of the police station. Those are the closest stalls that we have. They can be used by anyone who has a designated handicap parking license plate or hanger, whether they're using the senior center or city hall or whatever.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So, for example, across at the Mineral Street, there's supposed to be senior parking there. Will all of those have a sign by them? Will those three, for example, have a sign?
There will be a sign for those actually 4 stalls. I don't foresee having individual signs for the individual stalls.
So you're gonna say for those 4, that this is senior center parking? A sign, one sign?
Probably just the one sign, Monday through Friday, 8 AM to 3 PM.
Then across the street by the city hall, you have handicap. So are those 2 there already? Okay.
Yes, those are there right now.
Then looking on 4th Street, again, the same situation, you have sign there. That'll be signed also?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
For the 2 stalls that are there. The same with the 2 stalls in the parking lot and the 3 stalls across from the police station. They should,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, any additional questions? If not, are we ready for action?
I move to approve ordinance 2303, an ordinance amending parking at senior center.
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Jason to adopt ordinance 2303, amending parking for the senior center. Candace?
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is resolution 2311, authorizing the city manager of the city of Platteville to submit applications to the DOT, Wisconsin Department of Transportation, for the 2023 Safe Transportation
This-
Alternatives for Rural Schools, the STARS award cycle.
Yes, thank you. We're competing for up to 4 of these STARS awards for this award cycle. This would be for our Mountain View Park Trail Connector project broken into 4 phases. If awarded, the earliest design work would be done in federal fiscal year 2024, which starts this October. Phase 1, it goes phase 1 to phase 3 from south to north along the designated gravel trail from the Jane N. Stone, behind Jane N. Stone, to Mitchell Hollow Road, to Broadway County B, and then up to Fairfield Drive. Phase 4 would be for the footbridge immediately north of Mitchell Hollow Road. It would convert the trail from gravel to paved and lit trail. Phase 4 would convert the current footbridge to an ADA accessible structure that meets the trail standards. Since the funding sources are different, snowmobiles can still use the trail as long as there's snow to minimize damage. DOT will allow all 4 phases to be included in a single resolution. I have received some additional information. The DOT is sending our grants forward to the state selection committee. But what they said was actually our phase 3 has 1 point higher in scoring than the other phases. So that would actually be the reverse from what we had originally said. The Fairfield back down to County B. I don't believe that that's a problem. We're continuing to move on with that. And the DOT said that they're hopeful to have their award selection by mid-July. And that would be in advance of the DNR's selection. So we would know in a timely manner what grants we would be awarded.
Okay, questions of Howard? It's nice that they're getting these things timed in a way that you find out and then you find out instead of like the last one. Okay, is there someone who would like to offer a motion?
Make a motion. I move to approve resolution 23-11 authorizing the city manager to submit applications to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for the 2023 Safe Transportation Alternatives for Rural School, otherwise known as STARS award cycle.
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Lynn to approve resolution 23-11. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next on our agenda, we're going to move into a section of initial resolutions. I mean, like 4 of them.
Yes,
Oh.
a rather large number of resolutions compared to what we usually see. And I'm going to walk through a little bit about those in the background of how we came to this point. And then we also have our municipal advisor, Brian Roma, here from Ellis, who's going to walk you through some of the impact of this borrow and what it does to the debt service tax rate and so forth. But I'm just going to start off with giving you a little bit of background. So this is the time of year that we work through the issuance of general obligation bonds, typically to fund street reconstruction as part of our CIP budget. However, in 2022, when we were planning our 2023 CIP budget, we were working on applying for some grants through the BIL program to do some street reconstruction. We did not get awarded those grants, and so that left us with not having a major street reconstruction as we normally do, but we did have plans for a smaller portion of reconstruction for Jefferson Street. So in order to utilize the rest of our typical borrowing, which we try to limit to borrowing the amount of levy-supported principal that was paid off the previous year, and so that was about $1.3 million. So in order to reach that level of borrowing and be able to fund additional CIP projects rather than having to cut them, we planned on borrowing for several projects that would comply with statutory requirements for borrowing. And so a portion of that was planned to be general obligation bonds, and a portion was planned to be general obligation promissory notes. As we worked with bond counsel and with Ehlers on structuring this debt, we were able to increase the number of projects that actually qualified for the bonds and downsize the amount of borrowing required to be undertaken through a promissory note. By doing that, we were maximizing the benefit of going to market and the issuance costs related to issuing those bonds. So I want to also to be transparent and fully inform the council, just walk through a couple of changes that took place as we were going through that process. So first of all, in the 2022 CIP budget, there was $185,000 set aside for the purchase of a 2.5-ton dump truck for the streets division, which had multiple uses. And in that budget, the 22 budget, that purchase of $185,000 was to be funded from general fund reserves. And as you'll recall, we typically fund our CIP through a combination of borrowing, tax levy, and reserves. Due to supply chain issues in 2022, and that was residual and continues to be residual from the pandemic, the dump truck was not delivered or paid for in 2022. There's actually a typo in the staff note that says 21, but I meant to type 22. Additionally, when the dump truck was ordered, the price had increased by $55,000. Again, something that we are seeing a lot with machinery and equipment and construction costs. So the additional $55,000 was included in the 2023 CIP budget, and this time to be funded through borrowing. However, as we looked more closely at this and as we've been preparing for this bond issue in 2023, since the dump truck was not yet paid for, we could bond for the entire amount of $240,000, thereby releasing that $185,000 of reserves from the 2022 budget. And I'm going to just pause for a second there and say, is there any questions so far? Any questions about the 22 budget and the dump truck and the $185,000? Okay, so I'll go on, and my screen just went blank, so let's see if I can bring it back up. Okay, there we go. So also in the 2023 CIP budget, we had $90,000 set aside to fund museum parking lots, specifically for the purchase of a property. And that $90,000 in the budget was to be funded by borrowing. But that actually represents only about half of the estimated cost of purchasing the property for the parking lot. And the other $100,000 of estimate for the property purchase is included in the CIP plan for 2024. And then also there would be an additional $221,000, or that's the estimate at this point. So that's pushed out to 2025 for construction. And just as a reminder, those two items are in the plan. And of course, we will have to determine the budget in 2023 for the CIP 2024 budget. So because of the timing of that property purchase and because that timing is uncertain, it's not ideal actually for a borrow. However, with the $185,000 of reserves that are being released from the dump truck that had been set aside in the 2022 budget, that $185,000 would potentially be available from reserves to fund that museum property purchase. Now, of course, that would be something that would come to the council at such time that that purchase was being requested. So it's $90,000 in the current budget, but we're essentially doing a switcheroo between the reserves for the dump truck and replacing that with borrowing, and then not borrowing for the museum, but knowing that we kind of have that $185,000 of reserves that could be used for that purpose. So I'm going to pause again and say, is there any questions on those two items kind of connected? Nope. Okay. So altogether, the amount that of projects that we are recommending to be funded through general obligation bonds for 2023 CIP is $600,000 for the street reconstruction portion of Jefferson Street from Madison to the cul-de-sac at $600,000, 2.5-ton dump truck for a total of $240,000. The street garage roof for $221,000, the end loader plow at $50,000, the fire department radio repeater for $37,000, and the compost site electronic access fence for $25,000. And the total of those added together plus the bond issue costs is $1,230,000. Now, for compliance purposes with state statutes that limit what a city can borrow for, those projects are grouped into 4 categories represented by those initial 4 resolutions. And then there's a resolution related to notifying taxpayers, and then there's a total resolution for the proposed $1,230,000 general obligation bonds. We do need the council to make those 6 separate motions to comply with the statutes. But at that point, I'm going to hand over to Brian, and he's going to walk you through his presentation and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you all for having me here tonight. I believe you all have what is labeled our pre-sale report in your packet. If you do need a hard copy, I do have extras with me, so just let me know. With that said, I'll kind of turn to the first page. You may recall from previous borrowing runs that we do provide an executive summary that identifies kind of the highlights of the financing package. The one thing that I'll identify here, please note there are components of that CIP list that Nicola went through that are only eligible for GO notes. So what you're approving tonight is just the GO bond portion, but we do identify kind of a total impact of 2023 GO borrowing in this packet. So I just kind of wanted to identify that. The vehicle for the GO notes is still being explored by the city staff. Just note we've kind of identified what that potential impact is to make sure that you're understanding of we're structuring everything together. That said, the GO bonds are 1.23 million, as Nicola outlined, for the projects identified as well as borrowing costs. That capital list is identified in Appendix A of this packet at the end of it. The statutory authority is 6704, which is your GO bond statute. And then kind of at the time of issuance, the GO debt outstanding would be 19.6 million, which is 46% of your statutory limit. As a reminder, you are only allowed to issue 5% of your total equalized value. So you can only have that amount outstanding. You are under 50% of that limit, which is still in good standing. We do have a chart on kind of the amortization of the general obligation debt later in the packet that does identify over time what that borrowing limit looks like as an impact of both the GO notes and the GO bonds. That said, in terms of a term and a call feature, we did see the identification to shorten this to 14 years as a way to still manage capacity for future projects. We've been working with city staff to identify the future borrowing for the next 5 years. You'll probably recall that we do the financial management plan each year. So Nicola and I have been working together over March and April to kind of update just at least the borrowing plan for that. And identify kind of how that looks. So just note that some of the structuring that we're doing is intentional to manage debt tax rate as well as overall debt service impact to total debt levy. But with that 14 years, there still is a non-call period of 8 years in which at June 1st, 2031, or any date thereafter, you would have the ability to prepay the debt. Anything to kind of request sooner than that typically comes with an interest rate penalty. These would be bank qualified, which just means you're not issuing over $10 million of debt this year. So it widens the playing field in terms of bidders who would be bidding on this debt. Going to the next page, some of the highlights from this is we're offering this in the similar way that we've done in previous years. We're going to be getting a rating because the city does have a good rating outstanding with Standard & Poor's. So we'll be continuing that practice. Our basis of recommendation for the split between bonds and notes outside of kind of the forced notes because we cannot bond for certain projects. We did look at alternatives based on the par amount to say, could we just issue a state trust fund loan for all of this? Could we just issue GO notes for all of this? Those came with either increased interest costs, which made the total cost of financing higher, or limited that future capacity that I spoke to in the term and structure section, meaning that you would be kind of forcing your hand as to future projects and maybe having to kick the can down the road for those projects if you were to shorten the term up shorter than 14 years to 10 years to do everything in notes. So in reviewing all of those options, this is our recommendation to the city to issue bonds for these projects. We'll be doing that in the same manner of issuing a competitive sale. You've had positive results in the past, issuing in this manner, in which you realize costs that the market is willing to pay on that day of sale, which I'll get to in a moment here. One of the notes that I will say is we have a section here that identifies premium pricing. You've had some recent sales that have had this, and recall that that is where the underwriter will offer cash up front for higher coupons on the back end that outweighs those higher coupons, but that might allow some flexibility to actually have even further decreased debt service levy because you can apply that cash up front to your debt service fund. So with that said, I think we're going to have good results here if the premium bid comes in. Beyond that, the latter portion of the executive summary identifies, making sure that arbitrage is considered here, understanding that money markets and your investment vehicles are increasing in interest rates, while the debt interest rate market is relatively stable at this moment in time. So that is something to be cognizant of, to make sure that you're not getting yourselves into a factor of where you're investing more than the debt service interest rate that you're paying. And then lastly, we do provide the service providers. None of those have changed for kind of recent sales there in terms of who's bond counsel, paying agent, and the rating agency. In terms of the schedule, the one thing I'll note there is we'll be working with city staff to develop the marketing material to offer these bonds in the near future, and we're looking to come to the next council meeting in June 27th for the sale of the bonds. Please note there's a 30-day period in which you do have to wait before we would sell the bonds. So understand beyond the time needed to prepare that packet upon your awarding the initial resolutions here, that time is needed by statute. And then estimated closing date is July 19th for monies received. Beyond that, in terms of the highlights on the numbers, I will turn to table 2, which is table 3, which is page 8, and the impact of this plan. Looking at your existing debt profile and some of the considerations I spoke to on structure, this identifies the kind of proposed debt service levy as a result of the total financing plan. So that is meant to say kind of bonds and notes there. So the one thing that I'll point out, and the reason for our structuring, is if you look at that levy change from prior year under proposed debt, or the orange section, if you do have that for table 3, page 8, about midway through this table, we're trying to reduce that debt service levy, right, each year, and also create that capacity in future years. So you'll see we have capacity not only 25 and beyond, but significant capacity in 27 and 2030 built in. So again, this is a continuation of the efforts that the city does in long range planning, and a way to kind of say that even with borrowing for new money purposes, you still do have the structure capacity for future projects as well. And then the other important note on this page is just kind of looking at a total impact. For an example, property value of $300,000 over the 14 years for your 2023 borrowing would be about $1,000 and $1,080. So that said, we're looking to kind of manage that tax rate at where it's been at about $2.30. So that would be kind of our plan moving into sale day. Again, with that total impact just over $1,000 there to that sample property. The next table just identifies that general obligation debt outstanding. So again, as we kind of amortize debt over time, you'll have additional capacity and still maintaining below your financial policies for your debt limit there. So with that, the appendices just kind of identify again the projects. Appendix B is to look at where we landed with our estimated interest rates, recognizing there's a 30-day period here. So we want to add a conservative measure. On sale day, we'll of course be back to walk through the results and final structuring as we work through that with city staff on sale day. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions of Brian? So it appears that interest, while bonds are selling for high.
Yeah, there, that last page, Appendix B, we look at a 10-year trend, for a couple of reasons. As, the chancellor, and her colleague were mentioning, there was a bit of an event in 2020 that did shift markets, and now we're kind of coming out of that. But with that said, the kind of scare and initial spike in 2022, going into, almost Q4 2022, has kind of stabled off, and we have seen a plateau. I will say there's kind of a shift week to week, because I do still think there's consternation as it relates to bank failures and the equity markets. But that does kind of provide stability for municipal bonds as a fixed income security for investors. So it's still a good time to be in the market. You're at about the 10-year average in terms of interest rate. So again, if we were to even expand that to 20 years, that would look even better, because interest rates were much higher before that point. So with that said, I do think it's still a good time to be in the market, kind of with that plateauing happening in the last 2 months.
Other questions or comments? So we take each one of these resolutions separately with a motion and a vote.
Yes, please.
And right now we would be talking about the first four in terms of authorizing money. The fifth one is to direct a notice of publication to our electors. That would be something published in the paper. And then the last one is a resolution for the sale that is a combination of 1 through 4.
Yes, that's
So if you
correct.
add the money, the initial resolutions 1 through 4, if you add those amounts together, you get the amount that's in 6.
Correct.
Good, a comment. Yeah, Brian, it appears it's a good time to be in the municipal bond market, but it's not a good time to be a taxpayer. We have inflation. We sat here 1 month ago and we talked about the cost of the taxpayer of what our fire department is going to cost. And it doesn't seem to me that we are backing away from some of this long-term spending that's going to continue to raise our tax rates. You say the market's unstable. I think we've all been paying that instability here for the last 2 or 3 years. That's my only comment. I thought we were going to back off from some of this spending. I think we have a CIP budget where we need to replace some items. I'm not sure about construction of streets right now. Perhaps having a budget that more reflects what a private person does, and that's paying something in cash, taking care of something like the fire department, so it doesn't reflect on our city taxes, and putting some of this stuff to the future, when perhaps we don't have this mystifying problem we had here a couple of years ago that has been affecting our financial situation across the city. But again, it's a good year to be municipal bonds. It's not a good year to be a taxpayer. That's the problem. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And of course, these were things that we committed to probably a year ago in the budget. And the dump truck, actually 2 years ago, we committed to, unfortunately. So as we enter budget time, Todd, which will come up now in July, August, for the 2024 budget, Okay, do I have any additional questions or do I hear any motions? There's a series of them. General obligation bonds for street improvement, and that basically is the Jefferson Street project. Is that correct, Howard?
Yes.
Well, I just qualify that and say that if you go to the report that was provided by us, there's a page in there, if I can bring it up, maybe Brian can help us with that page number, but it does. Each of these resolutions combines aspects of the borough, so that includes more than just the street reconstruction. I think it's
Sample language on page 44 of 70 in the packet as appears on the, posted on the website. The sample affirmative motions, is that the language that we're looking for?
No, actually, I was just, it's appendix A. If you turn to appendix A, it shows you the 782,000 actually consists of the 2.5 ton dump truck portion of it, the Jefferson Street reconstruction and the end loader plow.
Have that page. So do I hear a motion for initial resolution 2312 authorizing 820,000 in GO bonds for street improvement projects?
So moved.
Second to the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason and a second by Ken. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
No.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the second motion, the second initial resolution is 2313, authorizing 140,000 in GO bonds for what's called Parks and Public Grounds projects. And this, in fact, is the remainder of the dump truck and the electronic access fence that we talked about extensively at budget time that will be used at our compost site on Southwest Road and, Southwest Road. Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I move we approve resolution 2013 for $140,000, not to exceed this amount for parks and public grounds project.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken, seconded by Jason. We'll vote. Candace?
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss. Motion carries.
Okay, initial resolution 2314 authorizing $230,000 in GO bonds. And this money is to replace the street garage roof, which again, we talked about last year. Do I hear a motion? I hear a second.
second,
So we have a motion by Kathy, a second by Ken to approve initial resolution 2314, $230,000 in GO bonds. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot, Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And the last of these initial resolutions is for $40,000. This is for equipment for the fire department. And specifically, this is for a radio repeater.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by Kathy to approve the initial resolution 2315. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on then to the next resolution. This is resolution 2316. And it is the resolution directing publication of notice to electors relating to these bond issues.
second,
I heard a motion by Lynn and a second by Ken for adoption of resolution 2316. Candace will vote.
Cop, Arts,
Yes.
Parrot, Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And finally, resolution 2317, which is providing for the sale of $1.23 million in general obligation corporate purpose bonds, series 2023. This is a combination of the 4 initial resolutions we adjusted up.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by Kathy. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
No.
Killian,
yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I think that takes care of our series of motions. And Brian, thank you for joining us tonight. and providing, this information.
Thank you all.
Guess we'll look forward to your return at the end of June. Okay. Wonderful. Next, we're going to, turn to our city manager, Clint, for, the next item on our agenda, which is approving the expenditure of funds to initiate the process of creating a possible overlay tax increment finance district, tax incremental finance. So Clint.
Thank you. At the recent Platteville Area Industrial Development Corporation or PADIC meeting on May 10th, President Dan Dressen identified that the city of Platteville currently has some space in its capacity to potentially initiate another TID effort. We have a 12% total ceiling that is imposed by the state, and we're currently at 11.11%, which gives us some capacity to try to capture some more properties to create incentives. This means that the city has the potential to also offer incentives. As you know, our mixed use districts right now are past their point where we can do expenditures out of them. So it's hard for us to create incentive opportunities to bring in any possible commercial, industrial, or housing growth developers. Now, one of the major constraints in this project is timing. The numbers for establishing a TID are based off a annual report that comes out in August. We're currently working off a 2022 report that shows that we're at 11.11%, anticipating that in August 15th, the Department of Revenue will release a new report, which may or may not improve or make it impossible for us to do the situation. And again, the ratio is kind of based on your total equalized value in your taxable jurisdiction, and ratio then to the properties that you currently have established in the TID districts. So with August 15th approaching, we've talked to some of our consultants, and they say that in order to meet all the necessary meetings and drafting and planning, your best turnaround is a 60-day window in order to make this happen. So under these constraints and not having time to put out a full request for proposal with specification design, we solicited out to 3 different consultants that we have partnerships with. We had bids that came back. We had 2 bids that came back. The most economical of the two that did come back was Delta 3 Engineering, coming in at $18,000. The risks associated with this project is if the TID is not established, that $18,000 will have to be paid for through unbudgeted type of funds, which is going to hit our undesignated general funds that we have in place. If we do get it established, then it's presumable that those funds that we'll pay to establish that'll come out of the TID increment financing. So not to scare folks or make this a fast and furious decision, but the reality is time is pressing. And really the decision tonight is, would you like to authorize funds for myself to engage in bringing in Delta 3 to establish a DID, to have that potential to capture incrementals and try to incentivize some of our TED parcels. That's kind of the decision at hand tonight. Some of the other talking points that go along with that is, we know that we do have to be selective and creative and insightful on the different properties that would be established to make sure that our current TID districts have the revenue that they need to make sure that they close in the black. And we know too, in working with Delta 3 as the contractor, that we will need different financial supports from our current financial advising firm, Ellers, to help us connect the dots if we do have to go into any type of a bonding for infrastructure for incentives, and then helping us manage that TID district. And did I miss anything in our conversations that I had with staff? Okay. Council President.
Okay. So questions here in terms of TIDs. Okay, Kathy?
Mine is a question, but I guess I would like to have a little bit better sense of current TIDs. And Todd, to take back to what you said, this is like, okay, we're talking another $18,000. I'm offsetting that with the information, the knowledge of the expansion coming north on 151 from Dubuque. Opportunities there. I definitely think we need to be ready for that. I'm just not, I'm a little confused as. So,
Okay, so Howard or who's the best person to give us a very short explanation of a TID and what we mean by the project expenditure period
Sure.
and how right now we have 3 TIDs. We have TID 5.
5.
TID 5 is basically the north side of 151. Sometimes we call it the Walmart TID. Sometimes we call it the Menards TID. But that whole area on the north side of 151 is TID 5. So when we develop that, that's TID 5. All right. Then we have a second TID, which is TID 6, which is basically where our industry park is. So the hospital property is in there, where Emmy Roth is in there. So it's kind of the property off East Side Road. So it's south of 151. And the third TID we have is a special TID. It's what's called a blighted TID, or it was
Blight district,
created
yeah.
under a blighted TID law, and it's really the downtown section. 7. So we have 5, 6, and 7. We've got other TIDs that have come and gone, opened and closed. The advantage, what is the advantage of having a TID? Oh,
Oh, sorry. Okay, I was a little distracted there for a second.
so was I.
So,
Why do we have TIDs?
So yes, why do we have TIDs? Well, essentially, when a TID is created, the intent is that without the TID, we would not achieve certain development. And when the TID is created, it has a base value. The base value is the value of those parcels that are included in the TID at the time that they were included. And then any future development
So let's stop. So if you think of TID 5, when TID 5 was organized, that was all basically agricultural land. So it would have had a value as agricultural land, whatever the tax on that would have been. So then what happens?
So then, because it is a TIF district, and because the presumption is that that development would not have taken place without the TIF and without the incentives that a TIF can provide, then all of the taxes, not just the city tax that's generated from that development, but also the school district tax, the technical college tax and the county tax, all gets pooled into that TID. So that TID is able to capture the taxes for all of the taxing jurisdictions, and that provides the funding for the TID. So just to go back to this item, that the assumption is that the cost of working towards creating a new TIF would be paid for by the new TIF. But we wanted to make sure that the council understood that if for some reason the TIF was not created, we think it will be, but if it wasn't, then that 18,000 would end up being paid for by the city. So, but that's how TIF funding happens, is that those taxes are captured. And again, those other jurisdictions and the city are not losing out on taxes, because the assumption is those taxes would not have ever been generated if it were not for the TIF district. And then that income from those taxes can be used to help fund incentives so that developers come and are willing to put in infrastructure and are willing to build housing or corporate businesses or industry, because they're getting some incentive for doing so, rather than just developing in an open space that has no incentive.
Hard question for you, Nicole.
Yes.
Our past TIFs, have they been winners or losers for us as a taxpayer? And in your personal belief, based on your training, your experience, is this a win for the taxpayer?
I would say yes, it's a win. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So, first of all, TID 5 had almost no value at the beginning. And now I don't have the number on the top of my head, but it's $40-50 million worth of value in TID 5. And that's to recognize also that there is part of TID 5 that's not yet developed. So even without being fully developed, the TID has been wildly successful, and that's what you can hope for. Now, TID 5 is actually, because of how TIF law is, TID 5 is able to share with TID 7. TID 7 is our blighted downtown district. I would say that's successful because that has enabled development to take place in TID 7. We have a new hotel, we have a library. We also have a new apartment complex that was on blighted land. And so we feel, from my perspective, that has raised the overall value and the aesthetics and the population of our downtown area. And it's considered by all the people that are wiser than I that you need your downtown, your Main Street to be thriving in order for your city as a whole to thrive and flourish. So I would say that TID 5 being successful and being able to help TID 7 is a success story. Now, TID 6 has been a little bit more of a challenge, and TID 6 has taught us to be very, very careful in how we put together developer agreements. But even TID 6 has gone from being not looking very good to now mostly looking like it's going to be good in the end. And we've been able to extend that TID by an additional 6 years. We have the hospital working on some new development, and we have lots of space that could be developed. So that's kind of a long answer, but I did just want to quick circle back to something that Bob asked, and that was about project cost. So the state law gives a TID so many years to expend money in the TID, which is called a project cost time. TID 6 has already passed that deadline. So even though we have lots of empty parcels in TID 6, we can't offer any new incentive on those parcels because the project cost deadline has already passed. However, if we were to put some of those parcels in a new TID, which is called an overlay district, then we could essentially extend the amount of time on those parcels that we could offer incentive. So it's a way of kind of giving some new life to some of those parcels. And I would definitely hand over to Joe because he may have more insight on that than I do. No? Okay.
So Nicola, just for clarification, what you explained in the last part, that's what we're looking at right now is like overlaying a current TID district?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we want to do is have the expert, which would be Delta 3, because they've created TIDs for other districts, including the TID district where A.Y. McDonald has now chosen to develop a very large new project. We would want them to help us navigate what makes the most sense in these in this TIF district or TIF districts, it might be two, to maximize the opportunity that we could potentially offer for development, including housing, because these would be mixed use, but also to make sure that we preserve the health of TID 6, because we definitely don't want to take away anything from TID 6 in terms of increment that TID 6 needs to end its life being successful and in the black.
It possibly not happening. Right, I'm just trying to catch on what you're saying. If we approve for funds, what other step could happen that it wouldn't move forward?
Sure. So, and I don't want to.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
There are various steps in this process, and there's various approvals, one of which is council approval. So ultimately, the council has to vote to approve the creation of the TID district. And in that process, staff would be bringing you a lot of details about which parcels and what value and how the measure of the 12% and why we think this is a good idea. And there would have to be, Delta 3 would help with, there would have to be some estimates of what kind of development and what those costs would be. and where the boundaries would be. And so all of that would get explained in a lot more detail. But again, as the city manager explained, because of the timeline, we kind of have to get that process started and then bring that back to the council.
Another hurdle that you will have to cross too is you have a joint review board, and that's the chance for your overlapping tax districts of the county and the school district. Who, I mean, you have to imagine if ABC Industrial's coming in and that property value is worth 100, they build on it, now it's worth 200, so that $100 of extra increment now, the county or the school in the county, they don't have access to. That all goes to the TID to help. So there is a check and balance there in which your joint review board has to also bless off on it.
We believe that they will give their blessing partly because, well, mostly because they also benefit from growth in the city. They benefit from new housing because they're, we all know that new teachers or, new people, new businesses wanting to locate in Grant County in this area need housing and they need places to build. But there are rules about how much housing you could put in this district, and it has to be combined with potential commercial or industrial development as well.
Ken?
Yes,
Okay, you're talking about a TID overlay,
yes, sir.
and then you're talking about doing this on existing TID area, correct?
That's what we are expecting.
And
to
so
happen.
as far as on existing area, there's not enough development as far as infrastructure on those areas. And so do we have to put in infrastructure to entice people to come to those particular areas? Or do we have enough development of infrastructure so we don't have to do that?
Say those are the particulars exactly on why we would be bringing in Delta 3 is to help us manage what that plan looks like. Some of the other elements that, again, not to get over technical with it, is considerations on there might be reasons to alter existing TIDs to potentially take out properties to free up more of that ratio. There may be reason to expand into spots that are not currently in an existing TID. Again, myself and my staff don't quite have that full knowledge capacity, which is exactly why we'd be bringing in Delta 3 to help us manage that. Did that answer your question, sir?
So that question is going to be answered when Delta 3 comes in.
That's the intent, yes, to have that
Okay.
expertise in helping us solve the details of the.
So it's not a matter of making a new TID on new land, a new property.
I wouldn't rule out the potential that there might be, but overall, the vision and the conversation we've had is on existing TID or existing TID districts.
Interesting. Okay.
On existing land. So we're not talking about the west side of town, the north side of town, or the southwest
No,
side of town.
it's
Talking about the area.
incentivizing where we all have
where we are
infrastructure
in five-
seems to be the best
And
approach.
in some of those places, we do have infrastructure. We've put in roads, we've put in water and sewer. In some of those areas, yeah. So there is some, I guess, infrastructure there.
And with my limited knowledge of, TID creation, I would say that one of the things you want to target is not limiting yourself and then not being able to do something that would bring, new development. So I would anticipate when we get more information that it will include potentially doing some of those things, but also, as you know, I'm very fiscally conservative, so I certainly would not want, to put the city in a position of, being on the hook, if you will, for any uncovered costs. It would have to be done in such a way that it protected the city and made sure that the TIF was successful.
I have a motion if no one else has any other questions.
Okay.
I move to approve the expenditure of funds for consulting services to initiate the process of creating possible overlay tax incremental financing districts.
Okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Lynn to approve expenditure of funds for consulting services to initiate the process of creating an overlay or creating overlays, tax increment financing district or districts. Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yeah.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yeah,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that ends the action portion of our agenda, unfortunately. Because we had hoped to have one other action item on the agenda tonight, which is on the information and discussion now. The procedure for filling the alderperson District 3 position. I indicated to Candace that I wasn't pleased when she could not tell me that she had had applicants, but we actually had no replies in terms of applicants for the current open council position. So that means we have to extend. Clint,
Yes, you
Yeah,
still are,
we have to work.
are,
we have to extend. We have nobody to appoint.
Yes,
you'll
I
be
know.
reposting and kind of going through the same exact process. I'm looking for you folks to continue drumming folks that you may know from that district. And help them see the value certainly of the service without over intimidating them on the different stripes and the often punishment that you folks pay for little monetary compensation.
And also just to reiterate, like President Doss went over before, it does not need to be a formal letter. It can be an email that is sent into myself. So just so that people understand that as well.
And I would say this takes, I sometimes talk about the difference between push and pull technology. We can ask Jody to push this announcement out hundreds of times. We can ask Grace to put it in the paper. We can do a whole lot of pushing. But in fact, it's going to be up to us to pull someone onto the council. So that means we're going to have to think about people who live in District 3 and approach them. I have approached several people. I haven't been successful, but I will continue to make approaches when I think about who might do that. And people aren't necessarily opposed to government. It's just that, it's a big, you all know, it's a big
Yeah.
commitment. It's a big commitment. It's at least 2 council meetings a month. And then there's committee meetings. And then there's reading. And there's phone calls. And there's other things. So it's not a small commitment. And I think the underscore of this is that you all are very much appreciated for doing what you did in running for election. So we'll repost. I encourage people to reach out to people that they know that might be interested, and we'll see where we go.
Would we be able to provide just a little clarification again of kind of the location we're looking at in terms of District 3?
I was just
Okay.
gonna ask that.
So District 3 is actually on, you go West Main Street, so it's Sunset Drive and Moonlight Drive. It's all out by like the Rolling Hills Church out there. The only part of that that's not is Preston Drive where I live. And then it extends across the university. So the residence halls, all of the residence halls on the university campus. It extends up the hill across from where our compost site is. So that's the Fox Ridge settlement. There's 3 or 4 large apartment buildings out there and then several duplexes or fourplexes or whatever. And then it extends into what we have often referred to, those of us who are old, Golden Heights. Sometimes we called it the Ready subdivision. That's Pioneer Road. It kind of extends all the way out to where Medical Associates is, kind of out that way.
Does it include like the Knollwood neighborhood and?
No, it does not include the Knollwood neighborhood, so it doesn't include areas south of
If you,
Highway 151.
if you look off the city's website, if you click on City Hall drop down, meet your council, and at the bottom of that page, it has an aldermanic district map in which it pops up. I think you're looking at all the green section on the southwest corner of town.
So this would include a substantial portion of the many people we had in here a month ago reference the overlay district, correct?
Well, it would include, I don't know if it would include the people that were, no, it wouldn't include the people from the overlay district. Well, some, yes.
Yeah. Some that would.
Some it would, because
Okay.
Moonlight Drive and Sunset Drive.
Well,
Right.
it would seem to me that they were all pretty boisterous about one issue. Perhaps one of them would like to volunteer. It's a challenge out to them.
Here, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, that's the final item on our agenda.
It includes wards 5 and ward 6. And
Right.
so what has happened is that District 4 has lost a large part, which is Ward 6. And so that includes a new group there.
Yep.
So there are numerous reasons why people don't want to do this particular job, and you can start listing them off.
But there are numerous reasons why people should want to do this
Well,
job,
that's
and we could list those off too.
That's true. You can miss the pluses and the minuses. And so it may be a hobby to some people, but to some people, it's things that they don't want to do. Maybe the wife says, no, I don't want you doing that. And somebody else says, I don't want you to do that because it may affect your business. So you go on with reason.
Understood.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm looking for one motion yet tonight.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah.
Candace will vote.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yeah.
Doss.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.